In this video, I answer your question and show you how to make this sword. So watch the video to the end and see the whole process. You think that'll make a big enough billet for a sword? I think one of the next things to do is to start cleaning all of the scale and rust and everything off here. I want to get nice clean surfaces. So one of the things I'm gonna have to be real careful with here is to make sure I'm taking my time on these billets and not overheating them or underheating them while I'm forge welding, because this is almost $200 worth of steel here, and you could just have it overheated or underheated just once and mess up the whole thing. So I have to really be careful of that and watch my temperature on this thing. I'm getting ready to weld the ends of this billet together, and then we're gonna cover the sides of the billet with some sheet metal. I hope this will be enough. Doesn't look like a lot when I think about 45-inch sword. All right, well, let's open the door, get the forge lit, and stick those in there. Hopefully they'll fit in there, because we did measure, but you know how that goes. I think we'll go ahead and do this billet first. This billet right here, it says center on it. It's gonna go in the center of the mosaic pattern when we're done. Yeah, since they have casing on the outside of them, I need to really keep track of which one's which while I'm forging, because they need to be forged out dramatically different. It's gonna melt down if I use it anymore. The whole back side, all the lining fell off, and the lid's falling apart. It's bad, like the whole back side fell off down into the bottom. Let's see it. Everything built up around the door is gone. That's just some K-wool there, and it's like falling apart. My fingers. Fixing it. A little more than maintenance. It hurts. So the whole back of my forge fell apart yesterday. All the lining fell off, the refractory cement lining fell off of the insul lining on like about an 8 by 8 inch section, which is the biggest chunk I've ever had fall apart, because I've been keeping really good care of my forge. I gotta go pick up some more K-wool, and we're just gonna do a temporary K-wool top. Bye. We are headed to Granger's to pick up some insul slash K-wool slash fiber blanket stuff. 2 foot tall, 25 feet long, inch thick, 8-pound density. It's gonna be nice having a full-blown roll sitting there for when the forge breaks and stuff, like right now. I ordered some insul, and it should be in here now.
What's that under?
Kyle Royer. Thank you.
You guys have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Back to the forge again. Started this sword project a week ago. So far, got a design figured out and barely got started on the first part of the billet. The rest of that, I've been sick, are spending a long time on the design or just having a hard time getting the Damascus started because the forge breaking and stuff too. That is a lot of cable wool. Putting a protective coating on it now. See how it holds up here in a little bit, or at least the short term. We'll see if it'll hold up for the short term. Got the forge all patched up, getting ready to turn it on and forge weld out the second billet that we weren't able to do yesterday. Fresh meat's back on the menu, boys. This is the W billet. Got it all ground clean, got it marked out. I'm gonna cut it into 4 pieces and we're gonna stack it up. All right, so now we're gonna clean the ends off and we'll dip them in acid real quick just to see the pattern and help us get the pattern lined up because I wanna line the pattern up as closely as possible. In order to get the pattern to mirror itself all the way through the billet, you need to keep track of the number, keep track of the order the piece is going, and that's why I write the numbers on there. The first piece, fold it over like that. Now I want this end to mirror this one, so all I have to do with this one is just lay it flat on here, and then with this last piece, we put it on here and flip it up, and now the pattern is mirrored all the way through the billet. This should be ready for the ends to be welded up on it. And once the ends are welded up, I can go ahead and put some sheet metal on the sides just to encapsulate the billet and close it all in. So right after we get this forge welded, I'll do what I did with the first starting out billets and grind off all this extra mild steel on the sides, and we'll forge this thing out. Forge this out. It doesn't quite fit in the forge. It's super heavy. Oh, and it's not square. Kind of a giant rectangle. I don't know about this. Could mess up the whole billet now. Spent like multiple days on it and got about $200 in steel there. Probably about $50, $60 in propane, grinding wheels, sanding belts, and then yeah, multiple days, 4 or 5 days or something into it. My stomach's nervous. Got the casing ground off. Time to forge it down. I think I'll forge it down to about 1 3/4 inches and then re-square the billet. Yeah, we're gonna grind this billet clean on 4 sides, and then we'll end up cutting it up into 4 pieces and 4-weighing it so we have a mosaic. Well, let's get grinding. I'm gonna MIG weld the ends of the billet and then cover the 4 seams on the sides with some TIG weld. I'll use just a little bit of heat, puddle the weld up on top of the steel as much as I can so it doesn't get down in the steel. Well, yesterday I took the 10 pieces, 4 small bars on each side and 2 thick bars, put them all together in a kind of a square. It was more of a rectangle. Stuck it in there and started forging it down, and that's what I've got so far. so let's start surface grinding on this right now. I got the bar surface ground. So the next thing I'm gonna do is get it all marked out, get the layout of where I wanna cut the tiles, and yeah, we'll start doing all that stuff. Here it is. Got it all TIG welded up. Got our casing on the sides of it, or the, I don't know what you say, but the broad area. Got our 1/8 inch metal welded on there. It's all encapsulated, so it should be a clean, atmosphere-free forge welding experience. Get the old forge lighter out, AKA torch. Turn on the propane extra high for dramatic cinematic effect. Avoid burning face off. Stick the forge lighter in the forge. Adjust the air, propane, air, and then actually propane. Final bit of forge welding, here we go. I think we gotta start straightening this bad boy. I don't know how I'm gonna do that, so I guess I'll just start doing it. I'm exhausted. I don't think we're gonna normalize it tonight. I think it's gonna take at least a good hour, and we don't even know if this burner's gonna work, so I'm probably gonna do it tomorrow, although it'd be better to do it in the dark. Might do it in the shop and just wear a respirator. It's about 290 thousandths thick. I want to finish thickness here of about 250 thousandths. So it'll give us quite a bit of material to grind later. But it's time to finally normalize this blade. Gonna heat it up to 1600 and let it cool to air temperature. Then heat it up to 1500, let it cool, and then 1400 and let it cool. And then I can continue grinding on it more, surface grind it down, roughen the profile, get it ready for heat treating. Guys, so Dad is over there, as you just saw. He's working on the quench tank for the sword. So while Dad's working on the tank, I'm going to profile the tip a little bit, because it's still about 1.5 inches wide. go for heat treating. It's been normalized, it's pretty flat, it's not entirely straight. It was really straight, but the surface grinder warped it a little bit. The quench tank should be almost ready to go. You gotta dump some oil in there and see what happens. If we got enough oil, I'm getting a little nervous. Nervous about the blade warping so badly that it can't be fixed without like forging it straight. I'm a little bit nervous of the blade breaking, a little nervous about the whole blade getting hardened properly with no soft spots anywhere in it that would etch funny. A little nervous about getting the blade heated to the proper temperature evenly and quenching this thing without setting my face on fire on top of a ladder over 5 gallons of oil and a plastic pipe. Let's heat treat this sword. No, that is really bad. 1630, 1620. We're done. We're done.
You got normalized again?
Yeah. I'm not going 200 degrees over. 250 degrees over. Carbon's just burning out of it. You can't just keep putting it in there and burning it. I got 10 thousandths of an inch to work with on each side. We gotta do 16, 15, 1400, 1500 quench. Everything we did yesterday was for nothing. Now it needs to soak for 10 minutes at 1550. This thing's not holding temperature. I want to clarify something from the last video. It may have looked like I was upset at Dad. 1750. 1750. That is really bad. We're done. We're done. And I really wasn't. Just really upset that the blade got overheated and messed up and everything. I took it out on a pair of vice grips and kind of just like threw it to the floor. Anyway, I just want to let you guys know that I was not upset at Dad, and we love each other, right, Dad?
That's right. Lots of love. I'm on the phone.
The reason I was so upset at the blade for not coming out the right temperature was because we went through a lot of work to try to get that normalized properly the day before. When we pulled that blade out to harden it, and it was at 1750. That was about 200 degrees hotter than I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be about 1550. All that normalizing and stuff we did had to be redone. It's ready to go. Let's get to it. Let's harden this blade once and for all and get this sword moving along. Yeah, I'm super nervous. 1550. The color was beautiful. It looked really even. It was gorgeous. I about cried when I saw it. Oh my goodness, got a bad warp. Now I'm gonna pop this baby over on the surface grinder magnet, and I hope I can straighten that thing out. It's gonna be a challenge to get it straight. Start right here at the tip. Yeah, I mean it is rock solid there. It was soft on the outside, but as soon as I got through that decarb, rock solid. That's gonna be our next challenge, is tempering this thing. My tempering oven's 23 inches long, and this whole sword is almost 4 feet long. So I'm planning on tempering half of it at a time. So now we gotta figure out how to temper it. I don't think it matters, but I'm gonna go ahead and do this and stick that in there as far as we can. I'm feeling good about this. Should be able to temper half of it for a couple hours, stick it around the other way and temper it. I'm gonna temper this blade at 450 degrees. There she goes. Hopefully we'll be able to get the whole blade tempered pretty evenly. I tempered the blade last night. I think the blade, the part sticking out was drawing too much heat outside the oven, so it only tempered the very ends of the blade, like the first 6 inches or so were tempered, and that was it. That's not gonna cut it, and I don't have anything else long enough to temper the whole thing at once right now, so what I'm gonna do is temper it with the torch. So now I'm trying to get this blade straightened. I wanna get it probably 90% of the way straightened right now. One of my favorite ways of straightening a blade like this is to heat the center of it until it's like brown, or maybe even all the way up to like dark purple or so. As long as I don't get the dark purple in the edge, but just keep it in the center of the blade. The blade is warping this way, and I'll heat it on this side. I'm cleaning the color off here from the last time, a little bit of sandpaper, so I can see what color I get this time. I heat this side up to get rid of the condensation, because that can mess up the coloring a little bit. Now that the condensation's gone, I can focus my heat over here where I want it. Want to be careful not to get the edge any hotter than your tempering temperature. You'll have a soft spot in your edge. Almost there. As soon as I get it there, I'm going to put some pressure on it, pull it over pretty hard, and spray it off with water. You gotta pull on it pretty hard sometimes. We're getting her there. I need to work out here towards the tip a little bit more. The next thing I'm getting ready to do is profile the tip. So it's straight from down here all the way up to like here or so. And then from here, I want it to taper all the way to a nice sharp point. I've got the layout done on the sword for the fuller. Profile's done. Sword's pretty straight, pretty flat. So I got the layout done on both sides here, but the blade tapers a lot. So what I did was super glued some little shims on here to make the fuller rather taper the amount I wanted to when I laid it down on the flat granite surface, and then scribed the line on there. Fuller ground in, and I've been hand sanding this thing and trying to get it up to 1500 grit finish. So I got a couple little sanding things here that I made to do this with. This is just some kind of chunk of handle off of something, and I rounded it to fit down in the fuller, put a couple layers of duct tape on it so it would be kind of squishy, and then I can just take a piece of sandpaper, fold it around it, stick it in there, and go to town. And then I used that in a combination with this round wheel that I actually ground the fuller with, and I have some tape on there to make it a little bit thicker. So I want it the same diameter as it would be with the sanding belt going around there. And this paper is a lot thinner than the sanding belt, so there's extra tape on there to make it the same diameter. And then I use this quite a bit, mostly just on the ends, because that wood doesn't get up close to the end very well. A little bit of a pain to hold on to with ball bearings and stuff on there, but those are my sanding sticks, if you will. And I've been doing tons and tons of sanding on this, and got a little bit more to go before the sanding is all done in the fuller.
The next day.
The fuller is finally sanded. I spent the better part of a day sanding on this thing. My fingers are killing me from holding on to that little sanding wheel that I made up, but I got the job done. So yeah, this blade is now ready for the blade bevels to be ground in. We'll finally be ready to start really seriously removing material weight, because right now it's almost 5 pounds. Pretty heavy. The fuller removed a little bit of weight, but not a whole lot, and there's a lot of grinding here to do. Hopefully I can do it without too much trouble. I've never ground anything this long. The longest blade I've ever done was 18-inch blade. This thing is about 36 inches right now. Quite a bit longer. Hopefully it'll go well. To the grinder.
It's really critical to hold the proper angle right here so you don't mess up these crisp lines. That's the challenge of sanding this blade.
Tip it up 1 or 2 times like that and you'll just shred your nice crisp line accidentally. I got the blade hand sanded. The blade bevels are at 600 grit and the fullers are at 1500 grit. I'll finish sanding the rest of the blade after the handle's done, and then we'll do the etching and stuff then. So the next thing that needs done on this is for the clean up the tang, clean up the shoulders to where the guard fits up against the blade, and do all that. Looks straight to me. I'm gonna cut down into the tang and create that little shoulder there and probably cut it about 10 to 15 thousandths of an inch. So not much at all, just enough to make my guard fitting the way I do it go really well. This sword is finally ready for the guard to be fit on here. The guard needs forged out though, and that's what we're gonna be doing next. But I got the tang all shaped down close to the final size that it's gonna be. And I put my file guide on here and milled out a little bit of a 10,000th of an inch step all the way around the tang. I've also rounded the edges a little bit. I've even hand sanded the majority of the tang on both sides just to clean it up a little bit more than I normally do. It's looking smooth and sleek and feels really nice. I had to grind a little bit of a bevel on each side of the tang. So the tang is ready to go. Right now I'm ready to start cutting the slot in the guard and fitting it onto the blade, except the guard needs to have the quillions curved forward a little bit first. Hopefully I can do it with the torch because I'm using a big, massive 1018 mild steel bar. It's about 3/4 of an inch thick and 1 3/8 inches wide, so let's get to forging. Got just the rough radius forged in. So the next thing I need to do on this guard is it comes to a point right here in the center, so I need to grind away a bunch of material right in here and get it to that shape that it needs to be. And then I can start fitting the guard to the blade. Took way longer than I thought it was going to take. It's finally uniform on both sides. That took forever. So yeah, guys, if it seems like everything just falls into place for me, it really doesn't. A lot of times this is what it's like. Anybody can do it if you stick with it long enough, but it is not always easy. Each one of these lines on here represents me coming over here, drawing lines around this piece, looking at the low spots or the high spots, taking it back over to the grinder, grinding it, bringing it back, doing another line. So I took this thing to the grinder a bunch.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22.
23 times. 23 times over to the grinder just to get the radius the same on both sides. The next thing we can do is start doing layout for where the blade will fit onto the guard, and then start milling out the slot for the guard. And something I like to do on my guards that you guys might have seen before is I like to have the ricasso area fit into the guard about 10,000ths of an inch so it'll have a really nice tight fit. And I actually recess that in there by hammering my guard on until it leaves a mark and going in there with the dental burr and removing material until the blade physically fits into the guard. I've nearly got the guard fitted to the blade. I've spent a lot of time. This is definitely the most complicated guard fit I've ever had to do. May have seen 2 little dots on the back side here. That indicates which side is up. I also have an arrow on the tang, so I can put this on the same way every time. Do a little inspection, see how it's looking. Oh man, it looks amazing. I am really happy with that. That was the most challenging guard fit ever. And it looks like it's integral with the blade. I mean, it's as good as it gets. Couldn't really ask for it to be any better. I think I'm just about to the stage where I can start making the front spacer now. I've got a chunk of metal cut off here for the front spacer. I've also marked out where that piece is gonna go. I've made it a little bit longer than I need the final piece to be. It's about 1.5 inches long. I marked out the center of it and marked out where the tang goes on there. So now I'm gonna take it over the milling machine and mill out a slot for it to fit up on the tang. to get that radius established how I want it on the top and bottom, then I can start moving on to fitting the ivory and cutting the slot out in the ivory for it to fit up over the tank. Have this front spacer shaped. I always like to get these two sides shaped before I fit the handle material on, just so I can line the handle material up properly this way. What I was going for was a little bit of a flow. You can see this little tiny choil area here that I've cut away on the blade. If you look at it carefully, that flow that curve on the choil goes right into the front spacer. I wanted it to just kind of flow out into the handle. The next thing I can do is draw some lines on this handle material where the tang goes and start drilling holes and milling and broaching it out until I get it to fit up on here. Dude, pretty tight fit. Not bad, man, not bad at all. Normally stuff doesn't come out that good for me. Uber sweet. That is sweet. We're pretty much ready to start working on figuring out how to do the pommel. We're gonna start working on the pommel next. Pommel nut, figure out what I'm gonna do to shape this tang down, and the end of the tang will be threaded. So I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do there and start working on this next. Mill the end of that flat, take it in, figure out how long I need to cut it because it's a lot longer than it needs to be. You know how I like to have a flat thing to go off of. So let's start grinding, milling, drilling, lathing, and cutting away at this thing. So here's the pommel. Got a 5/16 hole going all the way through this piece of metal. And I've also made on one end of it a 3/8 of an inch hole that goes in about 1/16 of an inch or so. I think I'm ready to chuck this thing up in the lathe and start turning it down. So I got this pommel turned down yesterday. I've got a slot in the end of it here. I think I can probably go ahead and make the pommel nut. It's starting to all come together. We got a handle and the pommel. This is gonna be the pommel nut. It's a chunk of mild steel to match the mild steel fittings that the rest of the knife has. I've got a hole drilled in here, and now I'm gonna take these 5/16 inch taps. We've got a taper tap, and then I've got a bottoming tap. Run through it with a tapering tap first, and then the bottoming tap, and get some threads on this thing. Then we'll take it and start turning it down on the lathe into a pommel nut. Here it is, just got it assembled. This thing is incredible. Love having it put together for the first time. Finally, you're starting to get all the components together. Just got the pommel nut finished. The pommel nut's actually ready for gold inlay. It's the most finished piece on this whole sword. It's probably even a little closer to being done than the blade actually. So here's the finished pommel nut. It's got 5/16 inch threads in it, and it's recessed to sit down inside of the pommel a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, but it sits down in there. And once I get the pommel all domed and everything, there'll be a nice, perfect domed transition to the pommel nut. If you didn't recess it down in there, it would have to have a flat spot. So the pommel would be domed, and then there'd be a little flat spot on top, and it wouldn't be a nice, smooth, flowing transition. So one of the next things we're gonna do is take this really, really roughed in chunk of pommel and start turning it down and get it really close to the final shape that we want. I've got the top of the pommel pretty much finished out here. It's at a 600 grit right now, which is probably a little further than it needs to be because it's gonna get gold inlay later, and I'll end up having to sand it back down to like 220. The next thing I wanna do is get this radius cleaned up and maybe sand on that a little bit and get it to come to a nice crisp edge right here. Something else that'll happen in the future a little bit later on is this will be turned from round to more of an oval shape, but that'll get ground in later after the lineup pins and the handles shaped and all that. But for now, getting the pommel roughed in there pretty close. This was turned down on the lathe round, but the end of the handle's actually gonna be oval. I carried that oval all the way through up into the end of the pommel. I have the handle oversized, bigger than the fittings, about 100,000ths of an inch or so, and that's because the style of fluting I'm doing requires that the handle material sticks up over the handle fittings just a good amount. I'm doing the type of flutes where instead of them being concave, they're gonna be convex flutes. So they'll be like roundy, bubbly, look like big giant noodles kind of. I really like that type of fluting, so that's what I'm doing on this one. And I think I need to start making it an oval, start working on these corners. It's gonna be a little trickier since it's flat on the sides, and then on the top and bottom it's flared out. So rounding it will be kind of tricky. I might have to use like the round wheel to do all that. In fact, I probably will. Yeah, that's what I'll be working on next. I've got the pommel completely shaped, ready to go. The pommel's ready for hand sanding and gold inlay. The front spacer is ready for hand sanding and then gold inlay. And I have the handle shaped to the final size it needs to be, and it's ready for fluting once the layout's done on it. So the only other handle part that needs aggressive shaping is this guard. And right now I'm just putting some layout lines on it to know where the center is and to know where I want the quillions to stop. And then I'm gonna draw on here with a Sharpie to just give me a rough guideline of where I need to shape down the sides of the guard. So you can see here I'm gonna be taking off a lot of material on here because this guard is massively wide right now. And then it's gonna come right to a point right here and then come down to about a 3/16 thick quilling on the ends. So I'm gonna start grinding on this thing once I get the layout lines all put on here. I've got all the fittings sanded to 220 grit for the sword. We're gonna coat the tang and the inside parts of the fittings with Vaseline and then dump this epoxy I'm mixing up inside the handle, put it onto the sword rather, and assemble it, put it all together, and then once the epoxy starts to set, take the knife apart, clean it all up, put it back together, let the epoxy fully harden, and then yeah, we'll be able to take the handle off and on, and it'll fit on perfectly like a glove every single time. This is gonna be really messy with this tang that goes all the way through.
Should I cut these on the bandsaw or try to cut them on the chop saw?
Toby Matt can't get to the phone right now. Please leave a message after the tone.
Toby Matt can't get to the phone. Please leave a message after the tone.
The epoxy will stick to the mammoth ivory and not to the tang if everything goes properly. That'll do. That'll do, pig. That'll do. I finally got the handle all cleaned up, got the guard cleaned up, got all the epoxy out of the places I didn't want it to be. Now, I've got the handle bolted to this little fluting jig layout thingy I made. So now I'll put it in the lathe and start doing some layout lines. Using the lines on here, we'll put lines all the way across the handle. 8 of them in total. Then we'll take it off this little jig thingy and we'll bring it over here and put a pencil in my height gauge and we'll draw 8 lines going around the handle this way. So we'll have a grid to then do our layout with. I'll probably use a Sharpie to connect the grid on an angle going from corner to corner on each little square, and that'll give us 8 perfectly spiraled flutes going around the handle. After that, I can start hacking away at this thing with a file. Get the ends of the flutes beveled with a 45-degree angle or so. I've got it marked out right here where the front spacer meets up. I can file right up close to those marks. Here it is. The ivory part of the handle is finished. I got it all fit up on here, and man, oh man, I got goosebumps putting this thing on. It's like super, super amazing. I love it. It looks so good. The sword is really, really coming along here now. I'm like, oh, I love it so much now. So far, everywhere the gold goes, I've cut in the grooves. I've got the grooves cut in on the pommel, on the end of it, all the way around the guard. I've got my name on here, Royer MS, on the front spacer. And I also have some lines going around it. And I also did a little circle on the pommel nut. I also went ahead and inlaid the gold in there too. So one of the next things I have to do on most all the pieces still is to go around and dovetail the grooves so the gold will stay locked in. Once I get done dovetailing all the pieces, I can start taking my 24 karat gold, smashing it into the grooves and have it lock into that dovetail. Once that's done, we can sand the surface clean, get these things sanded up to 2500 or 3000 grit, lightly buff them, and then gun blue them, and then the fittings will be done. So the guard's sanded, the front spacer sanded, pommel nut sanded. This pommel will be sanded in like 3 or 4 hours. And after that, all I've got to do is lightly buff the pieces to get that nice mirror finish on there, and then do the gun bluing. And hopefully it'll go right the first time, or at least by the 5th time or something. I'm absolutely terrified. Got to get the sword done. Feel like I'm gonna throw up because bluing a lot of times doesn't go well. Just want to get this done. Just got to get this done. Oh man, that looks beautiful. That side looks good. That looks good. By the way, I was thinking about how much time I spent on this guard, guys. This guard alone has somewhere around 2.5 weeks of work just in this guard. That's how long it takes me to make a pretty nice buoy or something, like the whole buoy. This guard has all that time in it. One piece. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. My black mirror finish. All right, guys, it all comes down to this. Like, one of the final steps we have to do now is sharpen this sword right here. So a danger that could happen here is if I lay this down too flat, I'll put scratches that'll go up onto the blade a little ways. This thing will just scratch the daylight out of the sword, and I don't want to do that. Here we go. Also, I'm pretty sure I may cut myself wide open or lose a digit. But as long as I don't damage the sword, I don't care. I do care a little bit. It's finally time to put this beast together. I ended up sharpening this thing for like 4 hours. Cleaning some of the oil and stuff off the blade now. I can't believe it's actually gonna be finished here in a minute. As long as I don't drop anything. Or cut myself.
I don't want to.
I don't want to set it down.
I don't want to touch it.
Hold it.
I'll hang on to it.
I'll hold it.
Are your hands covered in grinding dust?
I'll hold it.
I got it.
Just hold it for a second, Josh, while I put a buffing wheel on.
I got it.
Don't drop
I got
it
it.
until I say.
Here.
Don't hold it.
Okay.
I just need to put a scotch brite wheel on. What are you doing with that? I gotta do the final polish on the Damascus.
Well, that was scary.
With that wheel?
No. Alright, so the handle fits really well. Just a tiny bit looser than it was. I'm now gonna set the sword down on my sanding block here. Probably not the best idea, but there's a paper towel, fresh one. Everything's prepared. We're putting the sword together. I will see you guys on the other side of getting this thing assembled and having it finished. Cue B-roll. Here it is, the sketch before and after. It's finally done. Can't believe it. Hasn't set in yet. This thing's been done for a couple hours now, guys. I don't think it's hit me yet because I've been working on this 3 days short of 3 months. This thing came out epically amazing. 36-inch blade, mosaic Damascus, super high contrast. The finish came out amazing. Blued mild steel fittings with gobs and gobs of 24 karat gold inlays. Fossil walrus ivory fluted handle. Got my maker's mark here on the front spacer, which is something I've never done before, and it really pops. Master Smith on the other side. Deep, wide, fuller. Some of the largest hurdles I had to go through on this thing were getting the blade made. The blade had so many challenges because of the length. Starting right at the beginning with needing a bunch of steel to make the mosaic for the whole blade. I had to use 2 big billets. Keeping the blade straight during heat treat and forging and grinding, you know, that was a huge challenge. Some other things that were a challenge were just sharpening this blade. It took me like 4 hours to sharpen the blade, and it normally takes me like 15, 20 minutes. Grinding the blade was a huge challenge because of how long it was. I had to constantly be holding tons of the blade way over here while I'm grinding on an area over here, and vice versa. I will say though, the parts were really big and it took a lot of gold to really cover the parts the way I wanted to, like the guard and the pommel, so that took a lot of time to do all that gold inlay. Just one day at a time, you know, working on this thing. When I said this took 3 months to make, also keep in mind that I was working on it 10 to 12 hour days, so yeah, you guys can do this too. You can make a sword like this, you can do stuff better than this, a sword, or a knife, super cool knife, or any other art form. Tons of art forms out there, just stick with it if you enjoy doing it, and give it all your effort and persevere, and you can come out with a really cool thing in the end. There may be some tears and sweat involved and maybe a little blood, but it's really worth it in the end. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye. For this guard, a little too wide. Had to figure out a way to be louder.
More noise.
Wow. Wow. So I'm gonna rewind the clock a little bit here. That was a loud noise. It would fit because the guard was, I can't do this. Can't do it. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Knife Studio. Hello, testing, sound check. Can you hear me? Get that mic right up in my mouth almost. Ugh, it's covered in oil. I think my tongue touched it. Just do it, I am loving it. This sword is just doing it, I'm loving it.
Watch out for the airline in the
I
ceiling.
got the blade tangled up in there earlier.
Did you really?
Yeah.
How fun.
My workstation's a mess. First I gotta clean this up and get it all back to the way it goes. Dad's been using it. I have an order that's not that orderly, but it's an order that I keep stuffed in right here, my files and sanding sticks / files and random tape that doesn't go here. We don't use blue tape around here. Dad does. I don't. I like green concrete tape. I gotta clean this thing. This is disgusting. I don't want to put it on my face. Or some other. Faster. I think he's going as slow as the mower will go. Buffing and stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna set that down.